Okey, Assalamualaikum and Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kita akan mulakan dengan kita punya perbincangan untuk pagi ni. Okay, we're going to continue with what we have left before. So if you look through our session yesterday, not yesterday, on Tuesday, right? So during our session on Tuesday, what we have done is basically we have calculate the trend values. Okay, we have calculate the trend values for the situation whereby we have an odd numbers and also an even numbers data collection in terms of a time series data. Okay, so that is what we have done last time, and this process of calculating the trend values from the time series data is called the isolation process. Okay, it is called the isolation process, whereby in the isolation process we isolate the trend values from the four components. So remember that we have the four components: the trend, seasonal, cyclical, and also the irregular fluctuation, right? So we have the four components. So in isolation process, we isolate the trend values from the four components. And then once you have the trend values, you can take the trend values to the left hand side in terms of the equation, because the original equation you have is in this situation we are going to look at the multiplicative model. Okay, so we are looking at the multiplicative model. So basically, let me just make it bigger. Basically, our model is y, the trend values, equal to t multiplied with s multiplied with c multiplied with I, the irregular fluctuation, right? So this is basically our model. So we are dealing with multiplicative model. So we are not dealing with the additive model, because the additive model is not in our syllabus. So this is the things that we are looking. This is the model that we are considering. Okay. So in this situation, when you isolate the value of t, so that means you have found the value of t, you can bring this t to the left side. So this one is multiplied. So when you bring c to the left side, then you have what you're going to have will be this thing, right? Okay, so you get these values. So in this situation, kalau you perhatikan kat sini, so this is what we call as the variation. Okay, this is what we call as the variation. Okay, the right hand side is the variation, whereby we have isolate the value of t, the trend values, from the four components, and we take the ratio of the actual data to the trend values, we get the variation values. Okay, and the variation value, you have the option to write it in the form of decimal points or in the form of hundreds. Okay, if you multiply with 100, you will have this kind of this value as your variation. You have also an option just by taking the y over t. Okay, so maybe some of you just want it to be y over t, right? So if you take just y over t, so this is what you're gonna have. Okay, this is what you're gonna have. So you have y divided by t, right? So you get this value. So it's just the same thing. And remember, if you are using this, make sure if you are using just y over t, the number of decimal points that you have to use is at least 4. Okay, you should use at least 4. Okay, if you are using the hundreds, then you can use either 2 or 3. So preferably 3. Okay, however, depends on the questions, right? So you just look at the questions. So this one, I just make it as 4 decimal place. Okay, so in this situation you can see that you have both. Okay, so I just highlighted here. Let me just highlight this one. So this one is, you can choose either one, right? So whether you want to choose the y over t, or you want to choose the y over t times 100. So it's up to you. So whether you want to choose which methods that you are dealing with. Okay, it's up to you. Okay, so you have two options in terms of calculating the variance. Sorry, not variance, the variation. Okay. Okay, so that is what we have done before last time. So, and we have did for both the odd numbers and also the even numbers. The only difference is that for the odd numbers, we don't have the column for the centered. The moment you calculate the moving average, that will be your trend values. For example, like this one, right? So the moment you calculate the moving average, so that is actually the okay. So in this case, so you can see that for this one, boleh nampak kan? Okay, for this one, the moment that you calculate the moving average, you already got the trend values. Okay, there is no centering anymore. The centering is only being carried out, the process of centering only being done in moving average where it deals with even numbers. Okay, kalau digunakan even numbers 4, 6, 8, so then you have the centering column like this. Okay, you kena ada yang centering column. Okay, kalau yang lain-lain tu tak perlulah. Okay, alright. So that is what we have done previously. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is, sometimes in the exam you are asked to plot, okay, the sales, the actual data and also the trend values data. Okay, so sometimes you are asked to plot the data, the informations. Yang ni saya nak delete dulu ya. So let me just delete this one. I'm not going to use this one. Okay, so this is the plot for the sales data, and sometimes, so if you look through this one, so this one saya transfer daripada Google Excel, so ni, so nanti saya let me just try to adjust this a little bit. Okay, saya nak tengok dia punya let me just kita nak tukar chart ni dia. Dia yang biasa je lah. Okay, only the values. Tak perlu ada value-value tu nampak sikit. Okay, so you have the year and the quarter over here. Pasal apa dia jadi macam ni? Tak maulah color-color ni. Hilang pula. Okay, biasa. Pasal apa dia keluar color tak apalah. Biarlah color tu Okay, so this is actually the kalau perhatikan kat sini, let me get the legend. Alamak, mana legend ni? Apa legend dia ni? Oh, okay, dia keluar legend macam ni sebab dia gunakan color So, kita tak mau color kan. So, kita kena delete dulu legend dia. Saya tengok balik macam mana nak ubah yang tak ada color. Ni monochrome sahaja. Okay. Right. So, you have this. Okay, and then we don't want this. Oh, ni pun dia bagi dalam tu ni juga. Let me try get the legend whether it come up macam tadi juga ke. Right. Masa pula nak buat balik. Okay, tak apalah. Okay, alright. Since this one dia gunakan yang ni juga, so tak boleh kan, nanti saya cuba tukar lain lah. Balik dia punya. Nanti saya check balik. Okay, so this is the sales data. So this is the actual data. So if you want to plot, so you have to plot like this. So you have the year and quarter at the bottom. So boleh nampak the year and the quarter at the bottom. Let me make it bigger. Okay, so you have the year and the quarter at the bottom, and then you have the sales or the actual data on the vertical axis, and then you have to put the title over here. Okay, so this is for the actual data. So sometimes they ask you to also include the trend values inside the actual data, inside the graph, on the same graph. So what you need to do is to get the trend values that you have just calculated into the tables here. So kalau dalam ni you can letak kat sini lah. So normally in the exam you will have the trend values over here. So dia tak ada. So ini sebab saya gunakan Excel. So how to do that? How to include the trend values inside here? Let me get the trend values first. Okay, saya nakkan the trend value. This is the trend values. So I want these trend values. Okay, saya nak copy dulu. Saya copy dekat tempat lain dulu. I'm just copy it down here. Paste value only. Dan saya nak change this. dia titik ni. Ada di sini. Ada di sini. Di sini je. Boleh buat lah tak pasal apa. Okay, I'm gonna get this value first. So this is the 10 values. So I just get the 10 values inside the second sheet just now. So we start from the second one. Saya kena ambil yang sebelum ni. Hold on. I have to take not this one. Okay, this is the 10 value. So this is 10 T. Okay, you have the 10 values over here. So what you need to do right now is just simply add this to the graph. So kat sini kita just klik sini. So I want to select data. And then in this case saya nak tambah so I want to add. So the series name will be this, and then the data will be this one. Okay, the problem is this will be the problem. Saya undo dulu saya kena ambil yang tu saya just ambil ni sebab dia akan keluar yang kosong tu, tak tahu pasal apa. Sebab ni new features let me just get this one only. Tengok jadi tak. Okay, so let me just do this sekali lagi Okay, you have the trend here, so add new data. So kau jadi kat tak boleh buat apa lah So you have the series name is T, and then for the one here we take everything. Okay. Okay, tak boleh dia still juga ada yang hilang nilai tu I don't know why. Sebelum ni tak pernah jadi pun So remember this one yang memang tak ada So this is supposed not to be here So jangan pula letak pula Sebab sebelum ni tak pernah keluar pun So saya pun tak pasti pasal apa dia keluar Okay, content pun tak boleh Okay, tak apa Tak test jadi tak Okay, tak apa Okay, this will be the graph So cuma if you want to draw the trend together with the line here So this line shouldn't be here. So sepatutnya tak ada kat sini. So nilai ni sepatutnya tak ada. So I don't know why dia keluar juga kat sini. So sepatutnya benda ni, these two values shouldn't be inside the here. So sepatutnya the trend line only start from here. Okay, dari sini saja. So this trend line only start from here. So kalau saya nak buangkan dia punya line connection, boleh tak? Tak apalah. Okay, kita buat kemudian yang tu ya. So anyway, this is how you calculate, you draw the actual data and the trend data. Cuma remember, for this data, basically this one is not here. So dua ni tak ada, yang dua ujung dengan dua kat belakang ni tak ada. So this line. So it will start from here until here only. Okay. So dia akan start hanya dari sini sampai sini saja. So that will be the trend values. So in this case, the trend value will be in the middle. So it won't be stretched out from starting from the first column. So if you see this one, but the trend value here, if you look through this one, the trend value is missing 2 on top and 2 at the bottom. So by right, the graph shouldn't be having any line for these two. So it will start with 41.125 until 43.375. Okay. So that is the trend line. Okay. Alright. So any questions so far? So that is what we have done last time. So for today's session, what we are going to look at is what next. Okay, we have done the isolation process, whereby we have looked through the pattern, right? We have looked through the pattern in general form, in the long-term duration, what happened to the sales of this particular company. So if you look through this one, you can see that the sale is increasing, right? So how do you know it is increasing? Because you see that the value for the trend keep increasing, starting from 41, and it ends up with 46, which is an increment of about 5 units over there. Okay. All right. So the next thing that you need to do here right now is to calculate the seasonal index. Okay, what is the seasonal index? The seasonal index is basically to look at how the data, how the sales in this case, changes over time according to seasons. Because you can see that, kalau saya buang yang ni dulu, let me just remove this data set first. Alamak, tersilap pula. Saya nak remove yang ni. Just want to remove this thing. Alah, silap remove lah pula. Add balik. Silap remove this one. Okay. So saya nak remove yang ni sebenarnya. Okay. If you look through this data, so if you look through this data set, okay, so if you look through this data set, there is up and down, right? So and then you can see that just now, if you draw the trend line, it started here in the middle here. You can see whether at certain time whether the data is on above the trend line or below the trend line. Okay, so in this situation, the seasonal index will measure that particular difference. Okay, that difference, whether how much it is above the trend line and how much is it above or below the trend line. So in this situation right now, we have to calculate, the next step is to calculate the seasonal index. And the process in calculating or determining the seasonal index value is called the averaging process. Okay, kalau yang isolation process tadi kita untuk cari nilai trend. So di sini kalau kita nak carikan nilai untuk okay, untuk seasonal index, the process is called averaging process. Okay, so how are we going to perform the averaging process over here? So before we can perform the averaging process, we need the variation value in the table. Okay, so you need the variation value, so let's just put the variation value inside here. Okay, saya akan ambil the variation value here. Okay, these are the values yang saya nak. So Control C, so I'm using the hundreds. So I'm going to put it here. Sorry, has to be paste special value only. Okay, so this one I just want to delete cells. Okay, so this is your variation, right? So this is y over t times 100, your variation value, right? This is supposed to be over. Okay, so this is your variation value. So what you need to do right now is to use the variation value that you have just calculated in order to calculate or in order to compute your seasonal index. However, for calculating the seasonal index through the averaging process, you have to build your data set into the original form. So original form is like this, right? So you have the year on the left and then quarter on the right, on the column wise, right? So you have the years for the row wise and then the quarter for the column wise. So what you need to do right now is just simply copy back this form. Okay, I will copy this form and put it here. Okay, so I have that thing. Okay, you have the year and the sales, so this one I will remove the values. Okay, right? So what you need to do right now is to transform or to move this value for the YT or times 100, the variation value, into this table. Okay, so make sure that you move it accordingly. So when you do it manually, with pencil and paper or pen or paper and paper, make sure that you record the value correctly. Jangan buat silap lah. Okay, so record the value correctly and respective to the location correctly, right? So in this case, the first data that you have over here is actually boleh nampak can you see the screen? Boleh
Boleh, sir.
Boleh je lah Okay, so what you need to do right now, so this is for the third quarter 2002, the value is 63.2219. So you have to find the place where you want to locate this value. So this will be 2002 and then here you have the third quarter, right? So this value should be over here. Okay, so how to do that? Just copy paste So macam ni you all manually you kena all kena buat betul-betul lah. So I'm just going to just copy paste this one. So I want the values and I want transpose. Okay, same thing with this one. Copy. So again, paste special, values and transpose. And then lastly, you have this value. Okay, so this is the value that you have, right? So again, saya nakkan this part to be just 4 decimal place. Tak boleh lah. Okay, tak apa. Let me get this one. I just format cells. Not responding pula. Sekejap Okay, I want the number and then decimal place I want it to be equal to 4, right? Okay, so you have this value, right? Okay, ini adalah yang you dapati. Okay, just make it bigger. Alright, so what next? So apa yang perlu dilakukan selepas ni? So what are we going to do to perform after this? Okay, the next thing to do is to come up with your process or averaging process to calculate your seasonal index. Okay, the first thing that you need to do is to find the average. Okay, the average for each of the column. Okay, there is an option whether you want to calculate the total first and then calculate the average, or you can just straight away calculate the average. You can also do this, so you calculate the total first and then baru you kira dia punya average. Okay, so this one is optional. Okay, this is optional, so this one adalah optional. So you nak buat boleh, you tak buat pun tak apa. Okay, so this one is optional. Okay, saya highlight dulu. So nak buat boleh, tak buat tak apa. So what I can do is here is to calculate the average. So average for each column. So kalau in this situation, all the column has 2 values, so it's okay. Okay, sometimes maybe you will run into a column whereby the number of data that you have in particular column is not the same. Okay, they are not the same. So in this case, maybe some of the column have 3, some of the column has only 2. But in our situation right now, both all columns have only 2 values. So you can just calculate the average, right? So if you have column whereby some have 2, some have 3, so make sure that you calculate the average correctly. Okay, pastikan you kira dia punya purata dengan betul. So kalau maksudnya kalau ada 3 data, maksudnya you bagi dengan 3 lah. Kalau katakan hanya ada 2 data, you bagi dengan 2 saja. Contoh yang ni tak ada masalah sebab semuanya 2, so semua bagi dengan 2. So I just calculate the average over here. So I can just select this part. Okay, so I get the average over here and then I can just copy up to there. Okay, so that is the average value. Okay, this is the average value. Okay, so next thing that you need to do is to calculate the total average. Okay, the total average is just simply sum all these values. So you sum all these 4 values. Okay, you get this value to be 3956181. Okay, so if you want to have a perfect average, the value should be equal to 400. Okay, because this one you are respectively, because you have 4 quarters. So the value that you should have over here is 400. So you kena dapatkan 400 kat sini. Okay, that is if you are using the hundreds. In variation, you gunakan hundreds. If you are using the variation in term of like the second one, for the YT only, and this only have values of decimal 0 and 1, right? So in this situation, the total average here should be equal to 4. But in our example, in this case, it should be equal to 400 because we are using the hundreds. Okay, faham So, kalau katakan kita menggunakan nilai variation yang kita dah darabkan dengan 100, nilai kat sebelah total average ni mestilah bersamaan dengan 400. Kenapa bersamaan dengan 400? Kita menggunakan yang 4 quarter ni kan. So, if this is 4 column, that means you must have 400. If this is only 3 columns, then you must have it to be equal to 300. Ataupun 3 So, saya ulang sekali lagi. Kalau katakan kat sini kita menggunakan 4 kolom, maka jumlah di sini mestilah bersamaan dengan 400 kalau kita menggunakan nilai variasi yang dah darabkan 100. Okey, kalau katakan yang tak darabkan 100, dia mesti bersamaan dengan 4 lah. Tetapi sekiranya kolom yang kita ada kat sini hanya 3. Contohnya contoh untuk yang ni contohnya. So dia ada 3 je kan, 3 shift. So that means bila you kira dia punya average, total average, dia mestilah bersama dengan 300 sahaja, bukannya dengan 400. Okay, sebab dia 3 kolom sahaja. Okay, or 3 So we want this to be 400. So this value is not 400, right? So what you need to do is to do some adjustment. So kita kena dapatkan adjustment factors pula. So we have to find the adjustment factors. Okay, how to find the adjustment factors? Adjustment factor is by taking 400 divided by the total average. Okay, 400 divided by the total average. So in this case, when you calculate the 400 divided by total average, okay, you get the value to be 1.0111. Okay, what you have to do with this adjustment factors? Okay, these adjustment factors will be multiplied to each of the average value in order to obtain the seasonal index. Okay, nilai adjustment factor ini akan didarabkan dengan nilai average bagi setiap quarter untuk mendapatkan nilai seasonal index bagi setiap quarter. So, the next step is to find the seasonal index. So, SI over here. So, SI ni adalah seasonal index. So, apa nak buat? Kita kena darabkan setiap nilai average ni dengan nilai adjustment factor. You have to multiply the average value with the adjustment factors for each of the column, for each of the quarter. So, let's do that. So, we have equal 161 times the seasonal index. The adjustment factors. So you get this value and then you can just drag. So you do this for all the values. Okay, you akan dapat nilai ni. And if you calculate the sum, now you see that the sum is equal to 400. Nampak tak? So this is the seasonal index. Okay, kalau you buat yang ni, kalau you buat table atas ni, dalam exam, normally this table, okay, this table will give you 6 marks. 5 marks for the until the trend values, and 1 mark when you calculate the confidence interval. Sorry, the variation value. Okay, when you calculate the variation value. Okay, that is for the 5 marks. And then for the seasonal index calculation table, so this part, so this will give you 6 marks. Okay, 1 from the table above and then 5 from the table below. Okay, so that's why bila you kira you punya trend values, you have to add another column over here sebab kita nak dapatkan markah untuk yang seasonal index. Okay, alright, any question for this one? Okay, ada soalan tak untuk kira dia punya seasonal index? Any questions? Ada masalah? Tak ada
Tak ada, Zah.
Tak ada boleh faham Okay. Okay, let me just make it a bit nicer. Okay. Right, before we go for the interpretation, let's just look one more example when you have the odd numbers. Okay, so macam mana? Konsep yang sama, the same process, the same averaging process. The only thing that differ is the total average shouldn't be 400 anymore. Okay, so let's look at the previous example. So this is the previous example that we have, right? So that means in this case, you have to change this data into a new data set, okay, into a new form similar to the original view. So what you have here will be the shift. So you have shift Monday, and then you have the afternoon shift, and then you have the evening shift, right? And then for this one, you have Monday, and then you have Tuesday, and then you have Wednesday. Okay, so what you have to put inside here, so to put inside here is the value for the variation. So again, take the variation value. So you have to copy and then paste it here. So I'm gonna use this one. So values and transpose, you get this value. And then for this part, copy. Again, values, and transpose. And then last one will be this one, right? Copy and put it here. Okay, just values and transpose. Okay, make sure you copy the data correctly, right? So this is the working table now. So this is the table that you have to work for your averaging process. So let's just make it a bit here. I want this to be numbers, and then I want this to be for decimal place, right? Okay, so this is what you have, right? So next is to calculate. So yang ni saya tunjuk kaedah untuk guna yang calculate untuk total dulu. So macam saya katakan tadi, the total is optional, right? So you can also calculate the total first, and then calculate the average. Sama je. So yang ni saya just nak calculate total dulu Silap pula dia punya ni. Okay, so you calculate the total, and if you see for this example, some of the column have 2, some of the column have 3, right? So that means the total for the first one you have to divide by 2, for the second one you have to divide by 3. Okay, do not make this mistake. So some student they make mistake. So yang ni dia bagi dengan 2, yang ni pun dia bagi dengan 2. So bila dapat jawapan kat sini jadi salah lah. Okay, so be careful. Alright, so when I talk about average, so average according to column. So if the column have only 2 values, so that means you divide the total with 2. If the average only have 3 values, then you divide by 3. So the average is calculated by column base, so column wise, so tengok dekat column. So in this case, I'm going to just calculate the average. Okay, so you get this value. Okay, and how do you know that your average calculation is correct? The value that you have for the average shouldn't be too much different from the original data. Okay, from the original variation value. So the original variation value is between 93 to 96, right? So tiba-tiba kalau you kira ni bahagi 2 dapat 100 lebih. So it shouldn't be the case. Because your average value, okay, remember, your average value should be between the lowest and the highest value in the column. Okay, dia tak boleh keluar dari situ. So kalau katakan nilai ni paling rendah 93.3, paling tinggi 99.1, dia punya value ni mesti antara 93.3 dengan 99.1. If you calculate this value and you get the value to be more than the outside of the range of values, then you know that you have made a calculation error. Okay. The next you have to find the total average. Okay, the total average. So in this case, just sum all the average value. Okay, and then now you want this value to be equal to 3 or 300, right? So depending on whether you are using the multiply with 100 or not multiply with the 100. So if you multiply with 100, that means this one should be equal to 300. If you don't multiply with 100 for the variation, then this value should be equal to 3. Kenapa 3? Sebab kita hanya ada 3 kolom ni kan. Monday, morning, afternoon, shift. We only have 3 shift. So the next thing to do is to calculate the adjustment factors. And how to calculate the adjustment factor right now? So you just simply 300 divided by the total average. Okay, so 300 divided by the total average. Kenapa 300? Because we want this value to be 300, right? So this gives you 1.0062, and finally you can find the seasonal index by multiplying the value for the average with the adjustment factors. So what you need to do is just simply equal to this and then multiply with this one and 4. Okay, so you get this value. So here you have the value to be 300. Okay, of course if you do this manually, okay, kalau anda buat ni secara manual, you won't get exactly 300 lah, because you have the rounding off error. Okay, since I'm using Excel, of course you will get the value exactly 300. So in the case of where you get the value not equal to 300 or not equal to 400, after you make the adjustment, it's okay, no problem, because we know that there is an rounding off error. Tapi nilai itu tak perlulah, selalunya tak adalah jauh sangat Okay, kalau dah terlampau jauh sangat daripada nilai yang sepatutnya, memang ada yang salah lah. Okay, alright, so that is how you calculate the seasonal index. Okay, the next part is to interpret. So how do you interpret the seasonal index? Okay, macam mana kita nak buat interpretation? So the interpretation is very simple. Either you say it is above the trend line or below the trend line. For example, in this situation, suppose kita ambil yang ini sales kan. So in our case, we are looking at the sales. So you just say whatever the variable. Okay, whatever the variable that you are dealing with. Okay, for example, in this case, sales. For the and then whatever the time frame is above or below the trend. Okay, above. Okay, so this is how you write the answer. Okay, so nampak So macam mana nak jawab kat sini? So let's say in this case, so this is the general form So this is the general form. You can just say variable for the time frame is SI% above or below the trend line. How do you know that it is above the trend line or below the trend line? So the reference value here, if you are using the hundreds and the value that multiply with hundreds, the reference here, the ideal value for each of the column will be 100. So that means if you have the value to be less than 100, then if the SI value is less than 100, that means it is below the trend line. If it is above 100, so that means it is above the trend line. By how much? It depends on the difference between the value with the hundreds. Okay, for example, in this case, if you take the SI minus 100, okay, SI minus 100, so you take this value SI minus 100. Okay, so in this situation, you get the value to be negative for the first one, for the Monday shift. You get the value of the SI is negative, right? So that means if you take the SI value minus the 100 and you get a negative value, this indicates that it is below the trend line. If you get the difference SI minus 100 is positive, in this case, SI is greater than 100, then you have above the trend line. And how to write this? So suppose that you are looking for the Monday. Okay, for Monday. So how to interpret? So first kita tengok dia punya variable. So apa variable dia? Sales kan? Sales for company, let's say XYZ for the time frame dia apa? Monday shift, right? So Monday shift, okay, is SI dia berapa? SI dia 0.8592. And whenever you explain the index, sama macam kita belajar sebelum ni, kalau nak explain index, mesti dalam bentuk apa? Dalam bentuk percentage. So you have to put it in the form of percentage. So this means that 0.8592%. So is 0.859. Jangan darab dengan 100 sebab yang ni dah darab dengan 100 8592%. Above or below, this is negative, right? So it will be below the trend line. Apa tak? Okay, simple as that. Suppose that you want for the Wednesday, for the sorry Monday, but this is for not Monday, for morning, morning shift. Suppose that you want for the evening shift. Okay, macam mana nak tulis pula untuk evening shift? Okay, you can say that sales for company XYZ for the evening shift, okay, is what? Berapa nilai dia? 4.0055, right? So 4.0055% above the trend line. Okay, so that is how you interpret the seasonal index value. Okay, so this if you are using the variation that has already been multiplied with 100. Okay, if you have values that is not multiplied with 100, whenever you come up with the value in the SI minus 1, you will get a value. So bila nak explain, you have to convert that value into percentage. So that means you have to multiply with 100. Yang ni you tak perlu multiply with 100 sebab this one is already multiplied with 100. Okay, boleh? So that is how you interpret the values for the seasonal index, whether it is above the trend line or below the trend line. Okay, the last part in this topic is to do forecasting. Okay, how to forecast? Suppose that you want to forecast. Okay, katakan sekarang ni you are asked to predict. Ni pergi pula ni. For 2005, you nak predict untuk second quarter. So you want to predict what is the value over here. Okay, what is the value for the second quarter? Okay, so you nak dapatkan second quarter, so you want to forecast for the second quarter values. Okay, in this case normally you kena tanyalah. Okay, you have to predict. Now you have to predict. Okay, katakan sekarang ni dah bulan ke 7. So you want to predict what will happen, what is the sales for month of October, for example. So you have to calculate ahead the prediction values, right? So how to do that? So how you going to find the forecast value for the second quarter 2005. So saya ambil yang ni. Okay. So in this case, you want to forecast. So suppose that forecasting sales for second quarter 2005. Okay, you wanna forecast for sales for second quarter 2005. Okay, step yang pertama. Okay, step 1 is to calculate the trend variation value. So we call this as TVV. Okay. Okay, how to calculate the trend variation value? So what you need to do here is just simply take the last trend value minus the first trend values. Okay, and then you divide by n minus 1. Okay, so you divide by n minus 1. So in this case, you have to calculate this. Okay, you have to take the last trend values and then divide it by the first trend values. First trend values, and then you can find the value for the TVB. So this is the formula for TVB. Okay. So in this situation, the last trend values will be what? Okay, the last trend values here is, kalau you tengok dekat trend values, so your last trend value is 46.375, right? And then your first trend value is 41.125. So you kena ambil dua ni lah. Okay, so you get 46.375, and then minus, what is the next value? The first value is 41.125. Okay, 41.125. Okay, and then what next? You need to divide this by n minus 1. Okay, this one you have to be very, very careful. Okay, nak divide dengan n minus 1 ni, you kena betul-betul berhati-hati. Okay, you have to be very careful. So, because some students make mistake in terms of dividing the wrong values. So, you kena divide dengan benda nilai yang betul. So, you have to divide by, you nak divide dengan apa? So, n minus 1. So, what is the value of n here? Okay, this is where the student make mistake. So, here, for calculating the trend variation value, n is referring to the number of trend values. Bukannya number of data. Okay, it's not the number of data, but it is the number of the trend values. So, how many trend values that you have over here? So you have 12 data set, but you miss 2 values on top and 2 values at the bottom for the trend values, right? So that means you only left with only 8 trend values. So in this situation, n is equal to 8. Okay, n is equal to 8, not 12. Alright? So in this case, you have this value to be 8 minus 1. Salah pula ni. Dia keluar macam tu lah pula. Saya kena guna ni. 8 minus 1. Okay. So 8 minus 1 So what is the value here? So you just calculate the value. So saya akan calculate kat sini. So you have 43.375 minus 41.125 and then divide by 7, right? So you get the value to be 0.32148. So this one gunalah 4 titik perpuluhan So use 4 decimal place. Okay, so that is step 1. Step 2. Okay, to compute the projected trend values. Okay, step yang kedua, you kena dapatkan dia punya projected trend values. So this one kita nyatakan sebagai T projected. Okay, T projected And how to find the projected trend values? The projected trend values is simply equal to TL plus TVV and then multiply with T. Okay, TL plus TVV and multiply with T. So you already calculated the TVV just now, 0.203214, right? And then you have the TL is 46.375. So you have this one 375. And then you have to plus with the TVV. TVV tadi kita ada 0.3214 and then you have to multiply with certain values, right? So what are the values that you have to multiply? So what is the value of T? So you have to go back to your original data. Okay, this is your original data, right? So your trend value stopped at the second quarter 2004, right? So the next position is the third quarter 2004. So this position will take T equal to 1. Okay, and then it will follow T equal to 2, T equal to 3, and then T equal to 4. So in this case right now, you can see that your respective quarter that you are looking for, the value for T is equal to 4, right? So that means you have to replace the value inside the bracket to be equal to 4. Okay? So this will give you the answer for the next one. Okay? So calculate this value, you get this is equal to 43.375 plus 0.3214 multiply with 4. Oh, sorry, tak boleh gunakan kurungan. Kena ada. Okay, right. Okay, you get the trend, the projected trend values to be equal to 44.6606, right? Okay, so that is for step 2. Okay, and then finally step 3 is to forecast. Okay, so in this case we are forecasting the sales, right? So we are forecasting the sale. So how to forecast? So the formula for the forecast, so in this case, you are looking for y hat, y for 2005 second quarter. Okay, this is equal to, and this is given by the T projected. Okay, and then you multiply with the seasonal index, and the whole thing divide by 100. Okay, so this is the formula for the second part. Okay, so in this case, what you have here right now is equal to, sorry, saya kena tak equal kat tempat lain lah. So this is just simply, okay, saya tak kat sini Okay, this is just simply equal to what? So the T projected is 44.6606, and then you multiply with, what is the seasonal index? The seasonal index for the second quarter is 81.0014, right? So 81.0014, and the whole thing here you have to divide by 100. So saya akan ceritakan kenapa nak kena divide by 100 and the whole thing is divided by 100. So you will get the answers over here. Okay, what is the value over here? Okay, let me get the value. So you have this one, 6606 times 81.0014 divided by 100. Okay, so you get the forecast value to be 36.175711. So this is in 1000, right? Okay, let me just explain what we are doing just now. Okay, to forecast the sales for the second quarter 2005, the first thing that you need to calculate is to calculate the TVV, the trend variation value. And the trend variation value can be found by taking the ratio of the difference of TL minus T1, where TL is actually the last trend values minus the first trend values, and then divided by the number of trend values minus 1. So in this case, you get the value to be 0.3214. And then the second step is to calculate the T projected value or the projected trend values. So this is given by the formula TL plus TVV times T, small letter t, where the small letter t is the position of the time that we want to forecast, whereby t equal to 1 start after the last trend values. Okay, so kita tengok the last trend values. So after that, it will t equal to 1, and then we just continue until we reach where the position that we want. Okay, so in this case, the position that we want is in the fourth position. So t is equal to 4, and you calculate the projected trend values, you get 44.6606. And finally, to calculate the forecast value, what you need to do is just simply multiply the trend projected value with the seasonal index. And in this case, you have to make sure that the seasonal index that you choose is the correct one. Anda kena pastikan bahawa anda memilih seasonal index value yang betul berdasarkan kat mana you nak forecast. So kalau kat sini kita nak forecast second quarter, so tengok dekat seasonal index untuk second quarter. So you are looking for the second quarter forecast value. So you have to uh, find the seasonal index for the second quarter. And in this situation, the seasonal index is 81.0014. And the reason that we divide by 100 over here is because this value is already a hundreds. So you have to divide by 100. This 100 takkan ada kalau sekiranya dekat sini you dah guna dalam bentuk decimal point. Yang bukan dalam bukan YT darabkan dengan 100 tu. So kalau katakan you just gunakan YT sahaja, so yang dekat sini tidak ada dah bagi dengan 100. Tapi since this situation, we are using the version that is multiplied with 100. When we do the forecast, make sure that you divide by 100 again. Okay. Okay. So this is the value for the sales. So this means that you can conclude over here. So this is sales in 1,000, right? So you can say sales for second quarter 2005 is forecasted, is predicted. Ataupun kita boleh letakkan depan lah. Kita letak ke depan terus the forecast sale. Okay, second quarter 2005 is RM. So ada dua cara So you can put it in the form of RM 36.175.711, and then dalam kurungan you boleh letakkan in thousand in thousand. Sorry. Okay. So ataupun kita boleh letakkan kat sini RM tak payah letak kat atas. So kita letakkan dekat dalam ni pun boleh juga Okay, so you can write this like this. Okay, ataupun you boleh tulis dalam bentuk satu lagi. Okay, instead of just writing up the in bracket, you can just put this inside terus So this one is in thousand, so that means you have to move the decimal place 3 step to the right, right? So 1, 2, 3. So this one become RM. So this is 36,175.711. Okay, so you can also write this in the form of the actual data. Okay, nak tengok betul ke tak unit data ni, forecast value ni betul ke tak? So check balik. So this value is 36,000. So is it correct with the original data? So it is correct. So this one is around that value, right? So that means you know that this is, kalau tengok the second quarter pun, nilai dia 44, 32 and 38. So 36,000 is a reasonable forecast value. Alright. Okay, that completes our discussion on the time series analysis. Okay, untuk yang 4 quarter, the calculation for the forecast sale will be like this. For the third season pun sama juga So for the odd numbers, it will be the same. Okay, so that means if you look through the odd and even methods, okay, the odd and even method, the only difference is whenever you want to calculate the trend values. Averaging process and the forecasting process, the concept, the calculation will be the same. The only difference is the isolation process, where for the even number you have the centered value, and for the this one, for the even number you have the centered value. For the odd numbers you don't have the centered value. Okay, so that completes our discussion on time series analysis. Okay, any questions?